Welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road Podcast. I'm your host, Chris, alongside my co-host, Dean, and joining us for today's show, all the way from across the pond, is the host of the Paratalk Podcast, Reeves. Thank you for joining us today, Reeves.
Well, hello there. Finally, we meet.
We're happy to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah, I think I am a listener of your episodes. I do listen to your podcast, and I thought, well, I need to reach out to these guys and see if we could hook something up, and here we are.
I got to say, the biggest bonus for me so far is your accent. I don't know why I love the British accent so much, but like it's so smooth and like I don't know if you hear American accent, you probably think like, oh, these knuckleheads. But yeah, man, we're excited to have you on.
But this is my posh accent. Normally, I sound like because I'm down south, and so But normally I sound like a farmer. Some people say, but I don't know. I always think I'm West Country, but it's just weird. Just accents. We've got so many different accents over here. You can just go 100 miles.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
completely different.
That's like Hot Fuzz. Did you ever see Hot Fuzz with Simon Pegg? Yes. And they do the translator for the translator of the farmer. That's like one of my favorite scenes. My god! If
you go a little bit further down the coast, you get some people that talk like that. And that's proper, that's proper sort of, you go further down, get into Cornwall and you get the proper Cornish and, I don't even know what those people are saying, but that's.
It's crazy, right?
Great, I think it's great. They've still got their, sort of, little bit of their culture from the past.
Yeah.
That's great.
That reminds me of Chris, like the Appalachia. I don't know if you know about this, Reeves, but like the Appalachia mountain range in Eastern. So like we had the same thing. So I remember growing up, like one of my teachers told a story about having a flat tire in the boons of Appalachia, I guess it's called. People live there, but he had this guy come out with his tow truck and he just said he could not understand him. Like he was standing 2 feet in front of him speaking English and he just couldn't understand what this guy was saying, no matter how many times he repeated it. And that just always blew my mind that, 100 miles away from like a big city where people speak traditional English or like widespread English, you just can't understand. So I imagine it's probably the same for you when you get down to the boons or like down south further.
Yeah, I just like sometimes I'll meet someone and they'll be chatting away and they'll be using their regional slang and I'm like, I don't know what you're on about, mate. I'm trying to figure out in my head, what are you? What does it mean? What do you mean? Socks or what? Well, I don't know. So it does it does differ, and of course we've got lots of different regional dialects here, but you kind of get used to it. I mean, there are still a few that if I go like Manchester or Liverpool, they've got their own kind of what I call slang or whatever, but it's you kind of you learn it and watch. You can get it on the TV shows. It's just one of those things. You figure out in the end.
So Reeves, what got you into the paranormal? What got you to start Paratalk?
Well, I'm gonna go back even further than Paratalk. I'm gonna go back to when I was a little boy, a little wee lad. Now I don't know about you, but I grew up in of course, we all know the greatest decade was the 80s. But, even my listeners, I keep telling them that. But the 70s weren't bad. The 70s produced some amazing supernatural TV shows. Leap in the Dark being one of them. 1973, lots of different supernatural shows. They were amazing. You guys had them as well, like In Search Of, Leonard Nimoy, amazing stuff. We had their Arthur C. Clarke, Mysterious World. There's just some great shows out there. But I grew up in that kind of era of the 70s where that was kind of burgeoning, that those shows were coming to sort of fruition. And back then as well, you had like documentaries that were more like mini films. It's kind of like a film on UFOs was a production and it was something you could learn from. Like now it's just people running around in the dark going, it's got my leg. But now it's just like, it's a bit different. So I think there's, growing up then had a big impact on me. And of course, my dad was into the whole UFO thing. He was a member of the British version of the Mutual UFO Network. So he would always go to meetings and come back with little. So back in those days, they never had like proper full-on magazines. It was all like homemade stuff typed up and stapled together. And he'd come back with these pictures and stuff like that. And I would like look at them going, oh, look at that one. That alien looks like a dustbin. And that one looks like a lizard. You know, but I'd never read anything. He would tell me the story. Oh, this is an account of whatever. And of course, we had books, and I'd go to the library and get books out from the library. And of course, the late 70s, Close Encounters came. You know, you had Close Encounters of the Third Kind. My dad took me to see that with my brother, and that kind of blew my mind. That was amazing. So all this kind of stuff bolstered my interest to, you know, as a young kid who didn't really read a lot but watched a lot. And of course, in the 80s, when I was a little bit older, when I was in my teens, I had an experience, but I don't know what it was really. I'm not going to say that it was a UFO or UFOs, but it wasn't just me. It was me, my dad, and my friend. Back in the 80s, I don't know, when you're a little kid, your mum, can my mate stay over? You know, and you'd stay over, and we were just like Saturday night playing Nintendo, and we're looking out the window. It's like the summertime, and it was just like just mucking about, looking out the window, and we see these lights in the sky. This one little light comes over, and then this other light comes over, and another light comes over, and it's like a triangle in the sky. And of course, where we lived on the back of a cricket pitch, so it was completely dark. So we could see the sky really well. There was very little, well, there was light pollution, but it wasn't like you get in a city, you know. And we're watching these three dots in the sky with a triangle, and we're thinking, what's that? Because you've got to remember, this is like 1980, 1981, something like that. So, it's, you know, we don't know what it is. And we're watching these lights, and I call my dad, and he comes up, and he's got these great big binoculars, and he's looking at them. He's looking for his binoculars. He's going, good God. And he's writing these notes down. He's going, my God, it's Mexican hats. And I'm like, what's he on about? Give us a go, Dad. And he's got these big, powerful binoculars. We're looking, and we can see these kind of blurry lights. And it's not focused for our eyes, you know. And he's off on the phone, ringing up his mates. And then we're watching them, and it lasts about 10 minutes. And they slowly move apart, going back the way they came. And the one at the top just went straight up in the sky, gone. That was it. No sound, nothing. But they were much brighter than anything else in the night sky. And that was just weird. And of course, your kids, you go to school on a Monday and you say, yeah, we saw these lights. So, do you want to swap the action, man? And you just forget about it. You know, you just start talking about other stuff. And of course, that's in your head now. That's in your head. And that's kind of affects you a little bit, you know, and you kind of get an interest because you've seen something you don't know. And I'm not, to this day, right, I'm not going to say, I saw a UFO spaceship or whatever, because I don't know what it was. I don't know what should I say? I don't know what they were, or, you know, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I've got no proof of what it was. I know I saw something, and I don't know what it was, but it was weird, put it that way. And another weird thing that goes with that is about 3 months later, and it might not be connected, and I might be trying to put, you know, 2 and 2 together, or 2 and 3 together, or whatever. But about few months later, I had this bout of sleepwalking, and I'll tell you, my dad used to be a truck driver over your neck of the woods. He used to work from Canada to Washington State, hauling doing the logging stuff. And he used to do that 3 months, come in over there for 3 months, come back for a couple of months, and he'd go back again. So, and by this time, my dad had gone back to your neck of the woods to do his trucking. So it was just my brother, myself, and my mum. My mum was very, very easygoing. I could have my mates over, you know, we could watch the videos or whatever, play some music, have mates stay, stuff like that. She was cool. Don't make her angry, because then your life would change. But in the sense of you respected it. So it was cool. I wasn't just letting you know that I wasn't like stressed out or anything. So I started doing this weird sleepwalking where my mum would get up and I'd be in the kitchen like washing pots or moving things around. And she would like call my name like quietly, and I'd turn around and follow her back upstairs. And then it got to a point where she decided that she was going to take me to the doctor because she thought I was having some sort of mental episode. What she was worried about, if I could do that, then I was going to go downstairs and open the front door and go off down the road in my pajamas and walk in front of a car. That's what she was concerned about. And I went to the doctors and he did all these things and poked and prodded me and said, yeah, he's just a normal, fit, young teenage boy. And it's most probably hormonal and it's affecting his sleep pattern and stuff. And it was put down to that. But I had, along with that, I had these bouts of sleep paralysis where I would wake up in the night and, I didn't actually, I felt like there was something in my room. I'm not going to say there was something in my room, but it felt like there was something there. And I couldn't move. And it was like quite terrifying because if you ever had sleep paralysis, it's not very nice because it's like you're trying to move and you're trying to talk, but you can't. And all you can do is like move your eyes and you can see stuff, but you don't know whether if you're seeing what you're seeing is real. So yeah, that was a bit weird. And of course that went away after a while. And they just put it under stress. And apparently the stress of like my dad going away and stuff. But I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know what it was. It was just weird,
As you were talking about, I want to go back for a second to, first of all, the MUFON point. Uh-huh. We actually spoke to somebody not long ago who did work for MUFON. And what was it, Chris? Do you remember her name off the top? I'm really bad with names. I can't.
Anna Maria.
Yeah, Anna Maria. So the episode with Anna Maria, she surprised us because we didn't expect, and just like you did, like we did not expect to meet people who knew people or actually themselves worked for MUFON. Because Chris and I grew up in the 90s, and I remember MUFON being very popular. Like everyone was talking about it. Every time like UFO stuff came up, it was always like MUFON, the researchers and stuff. And then I kind of forgot about it for years. And then Anna Maria brought it up and I'm like, oh yeah, whatever happened to MUFON? And it's funny you bring it up as well. But I just think it's fascinating learning more about that you actually had reporters and now that I know, I didn't even know that they were also in the UK. They were all over the world. And that kind of feeds into the thing I was talking about earlier, where this idea that if you have people all around the world seeing these sites, these whatever they are, like you said, you don't know if they're UFOs, but some of them are clearly like they look like ships or something of that nature. If you have people all over the world simultaneously seeing this sort of phenomena, then there must be a lot of them, right? Because when I think of like UFOs, I always think like if there are aliens, there must be such a small contingent visiting us, or like even if they're here in the core of the earth, like one of those theories, like their numbers must be so small because any large number of ships or whatever someone would mess up at some point, right? Then you hear stories like this where things are popping up all over the globe for years and years and years. People have their own stories, their own experiences, and then I start to wonder, like, well, maybe the number isn't really that small after all. Maybe there really is a huge number of like a presence here. And it's also fascinating that there are different kinds of ships, like there are different kinds of sightings, like some are orbs and lights, which I think can somewhat be attributed to like natural phenomena like lightning orbs or whatever those are called. But then there's other ones like you saw, like these Mexican shaped hats or whatever, or the cigar shaped vessels or anything like that, where there's a clear definition or outline to the vessel itself. And it's so weird that there are so many different kinds. So I don't know, like we can just chop this off here, or we can explore this route with the UFO stuff. But I just thought that was crazy. You brought up the fact that you had a family member who worked for MUFON.
Did your dad ever talk about the Rendlesham Forest incident?
No. The thing was, my dad was what you'd call a field reporter. He would anything that people would say, oh yeah, I had an experience, and he would write it all down, and then he would pass that on to people that would go and do what they needed to do with it. I was still, back in those days, like the 80s, I was still quite young. And I kind of didn't really understand a lot of what he was doing or anything. I had an interest in UFOs, but the sense of being a young kid and having an interest in UFOs. When I got a bit older and I started to sort of sit down and read books like Jacques Vallée and stuff like that, and really sort of read the proper, what I would call the hardcore literature about possible theories and stuff, then I started to understand it a bit more. But what I was going to touch on was, this is what I find a little bit fascinating, is when you go back to, well, you can go back further, actually. You can go back to the 50s. Let's go from, let's just go from like the 50s and 60s and 70s. Though the UFO phenomenon goes way back, it goes back to the Roman times, even further, But let's start with the modern, what I call the modern era of UFOs. If you think about it, right, when somebody has an experience and they see something, say they saw it in the 50s, it was a flying saucer, right? A disc. Then you go on to the 60s and it was something a little bit different. It was maybe a cylinder, a silver cylinder. And then you go on to the 70s, right? And it was a square box. And also when they have experiences and they say, oh yeah, he was wearing a silver suit and he had a big square head and he had a thing sticking out of his head. And that was and then in the 50s, it was like, yeah, he had a big fishbowl on his head and he had a zip suit on. And you think about it, right? If you look at pop culture and you look at the stuff that was happening on TV then, and then you look at the UFO reports, I think there is a possible connection there with the way that we interpret the phenomenon. So, for example, I'm trying to simplify this so I don't get all weird and deep, but if you think about it, right, if I watch a lot of like modern us now, right, everyone sees greys, right? Not all greys, but the main UFO alien is a grey, right? Well, who made that? Who made that? That was Whitley Strieber and Communion. When that book came out with that little cheeky little face on there, suddenly that was the default alien. But before that, there was lots of them. There was lots of different ones. There was insects. I know that there's still others like now, but in sort of the grand scale of things, it's a grey. So I think maybe, it's just a theory, but maybe we have got some sort of the way that we interpret is what they want to show us in the way that we can understand. Maybe they don't even look like that. Maybe they just, I don't know. Maybe they're just a giant cloud. I don't know. But maybe they're showing us in a way that we can understand it.
That's a good nugget you brought up, actually, that I want to emphasize really quickly because I didn't quite catch it exactly. But so you're saying that there was a book that contained an illustration that had that original gray look to it. I had never heard of that, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people. Okay, called Communion. I'm going to look that up really quick because I think I've never seen that before.
Read it; it's an amazing book, and Whitley Strieber's experiences were off the wall. There's a film made of it as well with Christopher Walken. It's a good film.
Ah, okay. There are more human aspects to it than the more modern traditional idea of what a gray looks like without. There's actually, if you want to look it up yourself, listeners, just type in Communion Strieber or whatever, and you'll see the first page on Google. But it looks like the brow is much more flatly defined and the eyes are kind of jutting out further like high cheekbones, and the mouth kind of looks like it actually has some lips to it, and most importantly there's actually like a definition of a nose, whereas I feel like more modern looks of the grays, there's like no nose, just some slits or something like that. But yeah, that's interesting though, that we have this perception that they kind of look like humans, but they're not really. And I know this point is done to death now with all the podcasts out there and people like talking about it. But theoretically, if aliens should look like humans, then that means they should be branched off from us somehow. What do you think is going on with that regard? Like, why do they kind of look human?
I'm completely open-minded. I don't have any answers. I can only sort of come up with theories and ideas. I'm not going to say it's one thing or the other, but I will say that if you think about it in a more should we say universal way, okay, then if you all right, I'm just going to go really all kind of out there, all right, let's pretend, right, that aliens, okay, are not flesh and blood, right, they're not in the sense of what we understand to be flesh and blood. Maybe they are even not on our plane of existence. Maybe they're interdimensional or transdimensional, or whatever you want to call it, all right? And that maybe that when they have the ability to come into our plane of existence and basically form themselves into some material matter, which might be a little grey or whatever, so that we can then, or they can, not so much we, but they can interact with us. What's interesting is that when people do have experiences with abductions, I'm not saying that that's all in people's minds, because there are lots of weird cases out there where people have had some really wacky stuff happen, and not just one person, multiple people. But what maybe is they have the ability to move in and out of matter, solid matter. So some people, they'll say, "Oh, I got abducted and I floated up and I went through the wall." Well, what's happening there? Are they physically being abducted, or is there, should we say, their consciousness being taken, their self, their spirit, whatever you want to call it? Maybe that's being taken. You know, I don't know. I mean, it's so many questions and there aren't that many answers.
Going back to what Dean said, aliens having to be an offshoot of humanity. What if it's the opposite case? We're some sort of offshoot of them? Because that's what a lot of our creation myths are. If you look at the Sumerian myth and others, like Native American cultures and even some African tribes have a belief that sky gods came down and created humanity and one day they're going to come back type of thing.
Yeah. So that's kind of like we are a genetically engineered farm, and we're here for one reason and one reason only, for their nefarious experiments. And obviously, you know, there's the theory out there that we are being experimented on because they are trying to find a way to integrate with us so that they can basically live on this planet forever. If there is an extraterrestrial beings out there, I think as you say, I think they're already here and they've been here for an incredibly long time. I don't think they've just arrived and thought, in the last 100 years. I think they've been here for an awful long time. And maybe they've already been here and they were here long before we even existed. And as you say, maybe we are cultivated. Maybe we are an offshoot. Maybe we are... maybe there's a group of them and they're like, who can... You remember the sea monkeys? Remember the little sea monkeys you could buy as a kid? You put them in water. Maybe that's what we are. Maybe we're in little jars somewhere and they're just trying to see what they can grow and see what they can create. Maybe that's why people have these abduction experiences. I mean, the thing is, we're quite limited, right? In our ability to know what's going on around us, right? Our spectrum of vision is quite limited. Our hearing is quite limited, all right? And our sight and our smell is quite limited in the sense of, if you look at the animal kingdom, and some of the animals can smell for a long time, they can, a long way, and they can see at night. They've got superpowers when it comes to that sort of stuff. We're quite, I can go outside and it's dusk and I'll fall down the steps, because I can't see where I'm going. But the problem is that if you could think of I don't know, maybe I got a magic watch or whatever, and I can turn myself out of the vision spectrum of what you can see in, then I'm still there. It's just that you can't see me. Maybe that's what they're doing. There's a bit in Whitley Strieber's book in Communion where he has a log cabin in the woods, and they have some experiences there, and he experiences some what he thought was a form of poltergeist phenomenon, where his cabin things were moving around and going missing, and he was in his front room one evening. Now, I'm kind of paraphrasing this because I'm going from memory. And he swore that he could feel that there was someone else in the room with him, but he couldn't see them. But he could feel that there was something there. And he came to the conclusion that possibly there was something there, but it was out of his spectrum of vision. So yeah, it's possible.
That theory always scares me, but I find it intriguing at the same time. The fact that we could potentially be a scientific experiment, that they're coming back every few decades or so to observe us, to see how we're progressing.
Well,
because it's not something, because we do it. We do controlled experiments.
Of course.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could be a controlled experiment to see how fucked we can get if you look at humanity.
Yeah, we are on the scale of things. Yeah, I mean, if I were a traversing explorer of the cosmos, and I came here and I was able to walk around, I'd think, yeah, there's some okay people, but most of these people are like bonkers. They're crazy. They just want to kill each other over nonsense, really. If you're that sort of universally sort of moved on and you've kind of transcended all that stuff, I don't, I mean, look at the UFO field at the moment. It's just like you need to sort of unify and move forward, and everyone's got their own theories, which is fine because anyone can put their cards on the table and add to the conversation, and that's good because it brings up more ideas, and that's always a good thing. But it's when people start fighting one another. I don't know. It's just a bit. It's a bit sad, really. It's a bit. That's why I'll be honest with you. That's why I don't get too over involved in sort of these kind of community sort of based things, because it's not that I'm sort of I'm better than that. It's not that at all. It's just that I just can't be bothered. I can't be asked.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I try to keep away from that stuff. But Reeves, I gotta ask you, since we're on the topic of aliens, and Dean, I saw you lean in there, so I'll let you take over here in a sec. I was watching this documentary, and there's this artist who, I think the documentary came out in like 2018 or something like that, and I saw it during the pandemic. His name is David Huggins, and he claimed that from the age 18 for a while, he was being abducted by aliens and essentially having sex with their females to create a hybrid group of aliens, and they would come back and they would show him the kids, and he has he's an artist, so he's like painted all of these things. I personally think it might be something screwed in the head. But when you see something like that, and you growing up with a parent that, was into the UFO type of stuff, is there a part of you that's like, okay, maybe he might be lying, but maybe there might be some truth to what he's saying?
Well, here's the thing. There's lots of people out there that have said the same thing, that they've been taken aboard craft or vehicles, and they've had medical experiments done on them, and they've also been introduced to what I suppose you would call children that apparently they've been told that they're a product of them. And there's also women that have had what you would call phantom pregnancies, where suddenly they're pregnant and then their little baby's gone. So there is stuff that's going on, and he's not the only one. What it actually is, I don't know, but it goes back to the whole. Are we being are we being experimented on? Are we being sort of bred for a reason? And if that is the case, it's taken an awful long time.
That's the worst in my mind. That's like the worst idea about what could be happening, and it kind of fits with the narrative that we have today. Like, so we have so many scientific leaps and advancements that we just didn't seem to have for the rest of human history that we know of, at least. But in terms of like actually understanding stuff, like for instance, like let's say we all accept the idea that science says that the universe is like, what is it, like 15 billion years old or something like that, something crazy, so we're like, as we occupy the universe, it seems like we are much on the right end of the time spectrum. So many things have happened before us, before we got here. It's still possible that many things will happen after us, but it's definitely, if you want to subscribe to the 15 billion year old universe idea, then that means that many things happened before us. And I think that it's more likely that if there are aliens or extraterrestrials, then they are doing what you said, Reeves, like where they're trying to find some way to prolong their existence, like using us, whatever that means, using us as vessels, or using parts of us to continue, like, their DNA, to splice it together so they can continue on. But then also you have to think about the idea that, well, if a race of beings has evolved that far along and they are that scientifically advanced, why wouldn't they just upload their consciousness into a supercomputer or something that like sustain them forever.
Put it this way. There's loads of theories out there. Some people say that they're already here and they have achieved some form of hybridization. They're basically embedded in the global elites of the world, okay? And they're controlling things by the hidden hand, that they are part of the shadow government, shall we say, of the world. Now, there are other theories that the governments of the world are at war with them, and that they are out in Antarctica, and there's a space war going on, and that's been going on for a long time. And there are also other theories out there that, and this is the real, this is, some people might think this is just crazy, but I don't know. I'm open. My mind is open. Some people say that they are us from the future, and they are coming back through time to visit us. And there's also the simulation theory that we are part of a program which is running, and they're jumping in now and again and checking out how things are going. There's so many theories out there of what it could be, but one of the things that sticks with me is an episode of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World that I saw many, many, many years ago when I was a wee boy, where a youngish, middle-aged woman with her children lived in a farmhouse, and that she had a close encounter where this disc landed on her roof. She lived out in the middle of nowhere. She came outside. They were so scared, the children went and hid under the kitchen table. Huge disc hovering over her roof of her house, of her farmhouse. And she looked up, and they were two of the most beautiful people you've ever seen. They're completely humanoid. They had, piercing eyes, and they had long blonde hair, and they looked down with a face of compassion, but also sadness. In and it left. So you've got people that experience things like that. So I don't know. It's just, there's lots of stuff going on in the world, and of course, I do think that the pop culture, the culture that we're in, the way that the media program people, and of course the media does program people, it makes you think a certain way, also makes you experience a certain way. And when you have an experience, maybe we are a little bit of the catalyst there. It's a little bit like the paranormal. It's a little bit like when you go into a haunted house and you have an experience. Why are you having that experience? Why are you seeing that cavalier walking from room to room and then vanishing? Is it because he does it every day, or is it because he's he knows what he's doing, or is it because it's a playback from the past, or is it because you are the catalyst that's creating that to happen? You are in some way energizing that manifestation to form and become an apparition. But I don't know, so many answers and not enough questions,
That's why I love having guests on, because you just threw something out there that I've never heard before that we could maybe explore a little bit. But the idea that somebody who shows up to a site that's haunted, they themselves might be a catalyst, or something that instigates the event itself. And maybe it has to do with the DNA in your body, or maybe it has to do with the invisible energy you're giving off, or whatever frequency you're giving off, or something like that. That's a fascinating idea. But this is probably a great transition point to get into the paranormal side of the conversation. But before we do, I have to ask you, Reeves. So Reeves, you talked about this idea that we've mentioned before, that a lot of people have talked about, the idea that we could be in a simulation. And every time that comes up in a conversation that has to do with UFOs and paranormal experiences, et cetera, cryptids and whatnot, I always have to ask the guest, do you think that it's more likely that we are in some kind of simulation because we have experiences that are across the board with, not only do we have aliens, not only do we have Bigfoot sightings and Loch Ness Monster sightings, we also have ghost sightings and also religious experiences. So it just seems like this whole swath of all these strange things happening, it just seems very unlikely that they would all coexist in the same reality. So that's why I personally always fall back to this idea, like you said, that maybe we are living in some weird simulation where everything is possible. Anything can happen, pop in and out of existence, like a ghost or some creature or some alien. And that's the one way that they could all be within our reality simultaneously. But what are your thoughts on that going into the paranormal side?
Well, when you come to things like that, I do think the whole simulation theory, and also that comes off the back of the many worlds theory, where we are living in a multiverse, many worlds, all doing. We exist on an infinite plane of infinite possibilities, where we're all doing the same stuff, but you exist in an infinite Okay, but we're all doing different things. Our lives are doing different things. One of the worlds, you might not exist. You might have whatever expired or never been born or whatever. But anyway, so if you think of it like that, okay, and we go back to, for example, let me think about maybe, okay, let's just say a haunted house, right? Now, before we go into that, I want to just say, if you think of a washing line, right? Think of two washing lines together, all with like your bed sheets hanging on them, and think of them blowing in the wind. And every now and again, those sheets touch together, right? And each one of those lines is a timeline of each world, right? And everything is, when you touch something together, for example, when somebody says, yeah, I went to this place and it was lovely and the lady was lovely and I had a lovely meal and it was just like going back to the 1950s, And then I went back the next day or a week later and I couldn't find it. It was gone. Now, what did that person experience? Well, time slips are amazing and people experience them. Are people slipping across to different points in time? Are they traveling backwards in time? Or even forwards in time at some point? Because there are people out there that have seen aspects of the future where things haven't happened then, but they did happen many years later. So, I just don't know. I mean, you go into sort of the stone tape as well. That's another little pocket of it where you can, are we trapping parts of our, events in history, traumatic events in history, where they play back at certain times. For example, there's a pub in Wales. It's called the Prince of Wales pub. It's still there. It's very famous. It's got a very old function room off the back of it. Back in the 1980s, the pub suffered some paranormal stuff. The landlord then, he could hear, coming from the function room, which was all locked up, he could hear organ music playing at night and he could hear people moving around and stuff. And he's like, what's going on? So he would go in then. As he went into the room, it would all stop, completely silent, right? And he thought, it's a bit weird. Anyway, one evening, he was having a conversation with a couple of the locals one was a chemical engineer. I'm trying to think what the other guy was, but they were friends, right? And they knew about electricity and stuff like that. And they were telling them what was happening. And they said, look, we got this theory, right? That maybe if we charge the walls up, because these are like thick stone walls, there's no cavity, they're just thick walls. And if we charge the walls with electricity, maybe something might happen. Maybe we'll get something out of it, like a tape recorder, like some sort of playback. And I've got the original recordings of this, and it's mind-blowing. It's not great quality, but it's mind-blowing. So these two guys, they go in and they set up a charger, like a generator, and they put some probes in the wall, and they set a recorder up, these recording units, and then they charge the walls with 40,000 volts of electricity, okay? And then just proper juice the walls up and leave the recorders going. And over time, they start to record sounds. They record sounds of like a drawbridge. They record sounds of people talking in Old English, in Old Welsh. They record sounds of chains jangling and dangling. They also have like TV sounds, like TV broadcasts. And that room, that function room in the olden days used to be the local courtroom where people would be sentenced to, you're going to get hung or whatever. You're going to jail forever. That sort of stuff. So you can imagine how emotionally charged that place might have been, because when you talk about stuff like that, it's all to do with emotion. So when you think of a place that has a ghost that comes or whatever, maybe there was some horrible or sad event that happened. And at that point, that person is so emotionally charged that they imprint on that area, So the reason I say this is because there is a theory that over time, there are some hauntings out there where you'll see an apparition. And as the years go on, the person or the ghost or the apparition or however you want to call it, it fades until there's just a sound. There's just the sound of the person crying, sobbing or walking. And then that fades away. So a lot of what I think we're seeing with ghosts is our physical energy imprints in the environment. Not to say that, that's not to say that all of them, because there are some real wacky cases out there. One of my favourites is poltergeist cases. I really do enjoy a good poltergeist case. Of course, with England, one of the most famous is the Enfield poltergeist case. Everyone's covered that. But there is another one, actually, which happened in I've got some notes here, because I felt this one would be good to bring up. In 1974, all right? And this happened in my neck of the woods, southern England. And the reason I'm going to say this is because something actually quite creepy. I'm pretty sure it was this case. It's really creepy, right? This is this is like more like the Enfield. It was more based on like poltergeist. So the Black family, Mr. and Mrs. Black, right? And they got two daughters. One daughter's 20 and one's 12. Jane's 20 and Susan's 12, right? Now the phenomenon is focused around the younger of the two. Okay, so when she would go into a room, to bed or whatever, usually just before she went to sleep, they started to get all manner of stuff. It was, usual poltergeist stuff, things moving around, tapping, knocking, really sort of just the usual poltergeist stuff. But it only happened, right, when they would cover her, right, and she'd be led on her side in bed, and you'd only get that kind of phenomenon happening. And she had to be there, obviously, in the room, and it would only be in the room that she was in, right? Now, you could say, well, she's making it up. They're covering her up so you can't see her, right? You can't see what she's doing. So when the investigators came in, they thought, okay, so maybe let's just put that to bed and let's try something. So they asked the mother, okay, to really kind of disrespect whatever it was. Say that you're not real, prove yourself, you're nothing, And they did that one night. And the knocking got so loud that the walls of the home started to vibrate, and they had to leave the house because it was so loud, right? When they got out of the house, they put their hand against the wall and they could feel the wall vibrating. They walked, right? I wrote it down here. I think it was, 50 meters, 164 feet away from the house, and they could still hear the knocking sound coming from the house. So if a child's ability to mentally manifest that's an amazing weapon. I'm sure there's governments around the world that are trying to get children to be, some sort of weapon. But if you can do that when you're a child and then suddenly you lose that ability, that's just like, that's wacky. That's magic. That is magic.
You ever watch the movie with the old wrestler back in 1988, Roddy Piper, called They Live? Where he puts on the glasses.
Classic film, a cult film, that is.
Mm-hmm.
They Live, yeah.
And I remember talking to a previous guest who hosts the Trailer Trash Terrorist podcast, Vic Hermanson, and he was talking about an incident he had working as a nurse. There was this whole situation. Some little girl was assaulted and her dad was in the hospital with her. Then her mom came into the room and was very obnoxious. He said something felt off. She says to him, "Oh, you can see." And that makes me think of a type of situation where if someone goes to an alleged haunted location, the reason why certain people won't see anything as opposed to others being able to see things, it's because I think they're in tune with whatever that other side is, if it's the other side or that other dimension, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like some people are more in tune and receptive towards something like that, and they're more likely to see it. But when it comes to children, it's really hard to say, because I've said 1,000 times over, I grew up in a haunted home and I didn't want to experience what I experienced, but I did anyway. There are people that are in tune to it, and then there are people that experience it that don't want to.
Interesting you say that when you talk about growing up in a haunted home and experiencing stuff. I know of people that don't believe in the paranormal. To them, it's just a lot of old, it's not on their scale. They don't care about it, but they've experienced strange stuff. They've experienced weird things. Back in the, it must have been the mid-90s, I worked in the music industry for 13 years, from like the late 80s all the way up till like the early 2000s. And this was the time when I was reading a lot of books and I got into EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. I also got into ITC, instrumental transcommunication. The difference between the two is ITC is a little bit more involved, where you're using video feedback, video looping, where you're recording, doing a signal loop, and then you're playing back frame by frame to find out if you've got anything, pictures and stuff. But I got into EVP. And the reason I got into EVP was because a magazine over here called the Unexplained magazine. My dad started buying it. And when I was younger, the first edition came with a free record. And it was one of these flexi discs. Because back then, everybody had a record player. There was no CDs or anything then. And my dad goes, "Do you want this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll have it." And I put it on, and it's so entitled "Voices from the Dead," and it's all like captures of EVPs. So you can imagine my mum coming up, right, saying, "What you listen to, Reeves?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's just Voices from the Dead, ma." And she's like, "All right, yeah, your tea's ready in 10 minutes, all right." You know what I mean? But anyway, so I'm kind of like, I hear that and I'm completely taken by it. And it kind of stays with me. And years later, I get into the whole electronic voice stuff. And of course, I'm working in an environment where I've got access to really high-end stuff, good quality, Nakamichi and all that stuff. And it's good stuff. And it's the plant I'm working at is an audio duplication plant, which is analog cassettes, all analog back then. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to see if I can capture some voices and see what happens. And I tried it for 3 months. Okay, I'd stay on at work, and I would basically be talking into a microphone connected up to a tape deck, which has got a white noise generator plugged into it. And I'm asking questions. Anybody there? Does anyone want to talk to me? What's my name and all that stuff. And I'm not getting anywhere, right? And I'm 3 months, I'm thinking there's nothing to this. I don't think there's anything to it. And then I saw a program about ghost hunting and stuff. And this guy said that they tend to get better results if they have and this is going to be a bit weird, but if they have a bit of a laugh and a joke and a sing-song before they do an investigation. And they keep it very jovial, that they tend to get better results. And I'm thinking, well, maybe if I get my mate round and we have a couple of bevies, maybe something will happen, So the guy that I work with, I said, because he was a bit skeptical anyway, I said, "Do you want to come and have a beer and we'll do a bit of the EVP?" And he's like, "Yeah, all right. Well, because he just thought it was a low old chuff." So we're having a couple of beers and we're in the studio about 8 o'clock. And I'm asking these questions, playing it back. Nothing. And I gives it to him and I say, "Do you want to have a go?" And he's like, "Oh, is there anybody there? Oh," and all that stuff. And I like, "Stop listening to that." And I gets the cassette off of him, stops it, plays it back, and I'm listening to it, right? I recorded for about 2 minutes. About 30 seconds in, something like that, there's a pop and a click. And then as clear as day, I hear, I'm sure it was a male voice first, and it said yes, right? And I'm like, well, I'm like listening, and I keep listening, and maybe about 20 seconds later, there's another pop and click, and I hear a lady's voice, and it says, "Please reply." And it's just like they're stood next to me on the microphone. And I'm like, I takes the headphones off and I gives them to him, and I winds it back and I plays it, and he hears the first voice, and he's like looking at me thinking, "Yeah, what's going on here? Did you put them on there? Did you? That's not funny, mate." And he's like, he doesn't believe me at all. And I'm like, "No, mate, we just got some up." And he leaves because he's like had enough. And I got to admit, it scared me. And for like 3 months afterwards, I wasn't doing any of that. But it didn't stop there. Okay. The following week, we used to do these 24-hour shifts. We worked together, right? So we would work from like 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. He was doing the first of these shifts this month, right? And I got a phone call from him about 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, "Yeah, what is it? I'm watching Star Trek. What are you doing?" And he's going, "Did you just come down?" Because we had this door, the front door of the plant had a buzzer on it, so you knew if people were coming, because we were upstairs. We had this big mezzanine platform with all these rooms, and each room had a different thing, and he was in the duplication room. We would produce all our stuff at night, then it would get made in the daytime. And he's like, well, the door alarm's just gone off. And I said, the door's locked, so don't worry about it. No one's going to get in. Yeah, okay. Off he goes. About half an hour, 40 minutes later, the phone rings again. He says, yeah, I'm going home, mate. I said, why? Were you sick or what? No. He said, someone's up here walking around and I can't, there's no one here. And I'm like, okay, all right, mate. And left it at that. And we didn't talk anymore about it, right? The following week, it's my turn to do the night shift. And I'm doing the nights, right? And about 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:15, something like that, I'm sat in this room doing the duplication, right, of the audio. And I'm sat there and we've got a door, we've got a big window, which is looking out over the plant. And if you can imagine, I've got a light on inside, and then there's only night lights in the basically the production area. So that huge window is like a mirror. I can see everything in the room, which is kind of creepy in itself. So the door's open about, 2 inches. So it's a shaft of lights coming in through the room. And I'm sat there just reading a magazine and watching a bit of TV. And then all of a sudden the light dips like someone's walked in front of it. And I kind of look to my side thinking, what the fuck was that? And then as I look back, I capture the silhouette of I can only say what looked like a person, but no definition, just a silhouette move past the window. And I'm like, what? What am I going to do? And I sat there for about 10 minutes, not sure what to do. But all the duplicators, the slaves had run out. They'd all, stopped working, doing their recording. And I'm like, what do I do? And I'm thinking, if it's a person, I didn't hear anyone. I didn't hear anyone walking. So I had to go out and I had to walk down the hallway with all these rooms, thinking if someone's there, they're going to jump out on me. I'm going to have a fight or whatever. I don't know. I walks all the way out, walks down, turns all the lights on in the plant, and then just sort of walks back up and looks everywhere. There's no one there. And I kept all the lights on for the rest of the shift until like 6 in the morning. And then I left. And I didn't tell him that I'd had an experience because I thought I didn't want to make it any weirder. But there was one other weird thing that happened after that. Somebody else that does the printing came in one morning, and the printing pots, which are normally cleaned and left on the top of the printing pot, were in the pot and the top was sealed. We don't do that because there's no way that you have to actually peel the top off. It wouldn't just collapse in on itself. So yeah, and that kind of scared me a little bit, and I didn't do any more. I didn't do any more recording there or anything. One of the other things I forgot to mention was the cassette that I recorded on. I left at the works because I was too scared to bring it home. After I heard that, I was too scared to bring it home with me, thinking, if I bring that, I was still at home then. I was saving for my own place, and I thought if I bring that home and something starts going weird, I'm going to get shouted at by my dad. Thinking, you brought a bleeding ghost home. Now I got a bleeding ghost, And I was a bit worried about that, But yeah, I had that experience, and that was a bit weird. But I did have I've had 2 other experiences actually. If I'm waffling on too much, just say, look, can you stop talking? Because you just, But no, I had an experience when I went to on a school trip, two times on a school trip. I went to an old castle, right? I think it was Dover Castle, and I was with a school party, and we were walking around, and there was a tour guide. And he was telling us all about, the people that had lived there and stuff. And there was about 16 of us, and I was with my mate. And I saw this person walk, I caught it for a glimpse of maybe half a second, walk from into a doorway. And they looked like they were in costume, like in period dress. And I thought, oh, they're in costume. And I said afterwards, I said to the guy, I said, have you got actors here that are going to do an act for us or whatever? He said, no, we're the only ones here. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what that was I saw. But I also went to about feelings, right? I'm not a psychic, right? I don't profess to have. I think everyone has got the ability to pick up on the environment. Everyone has. It's just a question if you open yourself up to it. If you educate yourself on the subject, I think you're easier to feel, to pick up on it. I went to I did social and economic history at school, which is like the Industrial Revolution and all that sort of stuff. So we visited a lot of places like workhouses and stuff. We went to a museum It was like a weekend thing. And the museum was a workhouse which was as it would have been in the olden days, right? And you'd know that people didn't want to be there. They were there because they were just down on their luck. They had nothing. And they went there and worked. Maybe they get some food. They had a little place to stay. You know, they were just down on their luck. And they didn't have no choice. So they felt a bit pissed off, and a bit sad. And that, I feel, would kind of impact on the whole building, And when I went there, I was we're having this tour, and I was in the main where all the looms were, where they do all the spinning and the looms and stuff. And people died in there. Little kids would got killed in there, right? And had limbs pulled off and stuff, where they would put the little kids underneath to get all the wool out and stuff, and they'd get all tangled up in the machines. And I felt weird. I just felt really kind of like depressed and sad. And I said to my mate, "Do you feel a bit weird?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a bit weird in here, isn't it? It's a bit, yeah." And I asked to go outside. I said, "Can we just go outside? I don't feel very well." And I went outside with my mate, and I just like, it was a bit of a weird feeling. And I think everyone can pick up on stuff like that. You don't think you don't have to be, have to have any special gifts. I think that if you go into somewhere and you're aware a little bit, then I think you will in some way. It might not be majorly impactful, but I think that you will pick up on it in some way. But yeah, paranormal and all that stuff, it completely fascinates me.
We never talked to anybody who did something like that, where they went to a location, but they spent so much time there. I mean, we've had people talk about doing EVPs and, recordings and whatnot, but I think one of the most interesting parts that you brought up was you had a friend who was skeptical, and then he ended up being the one to conjure or to bring out this experience on the recording that he himself didn't believe right away, because he's like, "Oh yeah, mate, like, good on you for tricking me or whatever. Like, I know you put this in this recording in there, but of course, you didn't do that." And that's one thing that jumps out to me that is a good thing to bring up, just as kind of like a matter of fact, just point. But you're talking about doing this years ago when not a lot of people knew how to do that sort of thing. It could have been done, but I think that nowadays, with all of the technology that we have, and it's funny too, because people say all the time, or they used to say like 10 years ago, like, "Oh, these smartphones everywhere, like UFOs, someone's got to capture something." But the crazy thing and the ironic thing is that we seem to have skipped ahead in those 10 years so quickly with technology that now we have like artificial intelligence and all that stuff and advanced editing. And it seems like everybody and their mother does some kind of editing nowadays. So like we went in that time span so quickly ahead that we're on the opposite end of the spectrum now, where it's like now people don't believe anymore, not because it was so hard in the past to do it, but there were some people who could do it. Now there are so many people who can do it, and there's technology that can fake and mimic these things. And it's like we don't have any more opportunity to where someone is going to hear something who didn't experience it for themselves and actually believe it, or be there and see it and actually believe it. Because nowadays, like, it's just, you see it, you hear it, and it's just like, yeah, there's like 50-50 chance that this could have been completely fabricated. Like, I wasn't there to see it. And that's kind of like a downside, I think, to all of this technology and information spreading. It's just like there's no more believability unless you're actually there.
So here's the thing, right? When I used to do my EVP, I did it with a cassette deck, sometimes without a white noise generator, just a cassette deck with a microphone plugged into it, and just do me questions and switch it off and then play back. So it's just nothing. It's just a sound floor of, a little bit of noise. And then sometimes I would use a noise generator and just white noise, and sometimes change the frequency, so it's different frequencies of white noise, and then record and see what comes back. But I only ever kept stuff, and the only time that I ever got real good stuff with the Class A, what I call Class A, was those two voices. Most of what I would call the captures that I got it sounded like a load of people talking. All having a massive conversation, like you're in a big room and everyone's talking, and that to me is just junk. You can't tell anything from that. And as soon as you record something, right, and you put it into a sound editor and you start changing the frequency and changing the modulation and all that, you're changing what it is. So you're creating something that it originally never was. So you might say, that says candles. Well, have you made it say that? And so now you've front loaded yourself, and you're front loading other people because you're saying, listen to that, it says candles. But you've already told them what it says. Just give them it and tell them what. Because I've recorded stuff and I've given people the recording, and I knew what I think it said, and they've come back and said it's something completely different. So it's all how we interpret stuff. And that's why you've got to be so careful when you have evidence or you capture stuff, that you don't go and start front loading people and telling people what they should be hearing or what they should be interpreting. Because if you go down that road, you're just going to go around on the hamster wheel and not really sort of achieve anything. So that's the problem. I mean, digital, we're at a point now where we have AI, and I do think that AI is going to play a huge role in the paranormal, and sort of coming up with new ways to capture stuff and create videos or whatever, or look at evidence and stuff like that. But I just think that there's also, it can be abused. And if you look at stuff, AI video now is getting so good that you're going to get stuff before long, and it's going, look at that, that's like an apparition, it looks so real. And well, it looks so real, but is it real? And then the real evidence that people present, people are going to go, that's fake. It could be completely real. That's the problem.
On social media, there's been this thing bouncing around recently. Again, I think it's kind of old, but it's a bunch of like football players or fans like chanting. I think if you go on YouTube or something, you could probably find it, because one of the things that people hear them chanting is Bart Simpson bouncing. There's some guy who does some talk, and he asks the audience to read the screen as they're hearing this chant recording.
Yeah.
And then if you do it yourself while you're watching, you hear it, what you read it, and you hear what is being said, like, oh, that makes sense, it sounds just like that. But then he switches the words, it's a different sentence, and then you read it while you're hearing it, and then you hear something completely different. You hear that thing, and it's amazing that you can have the information as a human in front of you. And like you said, if you have even like an inkling or a nudge in a certain direction, it can completely change the narrative of what you're experiencing. And that is such a crazy shortcoming for humanity, but it's also scary that we could be manipulated that easily. Like, you just put some bit of information additionally in front of us. Like you said, someone saying like, oh, I heard this sound, and this is what it's saying, candlestick or whatever. And then like the person hears it. But if they were without that information first, or that nudging first, then maybe they would have actually heard what it was. So I think we get ourselves into trouble with that a little bit.
Yeah. Anything that's audio related, you've got to be a little bit, I mean, I always look at stuff. I would say I'm on the fence, and I would say that I'm a little bit skeptical, and I'm a little bit of a, open-minded, I'm happy to hear and look at stuff and kind of go down the road of, well, maybe it is real. But I'm also got that other side of me thinking, look at all the other possibilities it could be. I'm not just going to blindly go, well, it's grandma. That's definitely what it is. Because I just think you if you go down that road, then you're not really making any, you're not making any headway. But the problem is that when we have stuff that is like real, there's so much noise out there now that, the people that are trying to push through and make progress, they're not getting seen. I mean, there's some amazing researchers out there. I've spoken to some of them, and they do some really amazing work, but they don't get the recognition that I feel they should get, because there's so many other people out there that are doing it for, like, well, basically jump scares, I mean, if you go back, as I was saying, I was talking about the poltergeist case earlier. Okay, one of the phenomenons that happened there was, imagine this, right? Let me just put this scenario. This would make you a believer, right, of something, right? Imagine that you're in this family room, right, in the home, where you're with the parents and you're with the two girls, right, and they're in the room, and you're hearing all this stuff, right? And the girl's got her slippers, right, over by her little cupboard, right? And then suddenly you see those slippers move, and then like an invisible pair of legs, like, put those slippers on, and those slippers walk across the room. Well, that's something that's happened. And it's like, how is that happening? How is that, how does that happen? Well, if there is a phenomenon out there that can make things like that happen, are we doing that? Is it us? Is all the crazy stuff going on? Is it us? Is it just us doing it? Are we just manifesting it in some way because we're not conscious of it? And I'm sure that, I had a friend, right? Years ago, I had a friend who had a friend who had an imaginary friend, right? And we used to go off on like adventures and go to the woods or whatever and go whatever. And he would go, yeah, he's here. He's over there. He's watching us. And like, we can't see him. Where is he? He's over there. He's looking at you. He's laughing at you. And it's like, oh, right, okay. And we just like humor him. But maybe he was seeing someone. Maybe we just didn't, we were blind to it. Maybe because we didn't believe him, we didn't see it. It's a whole imaginary friends kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. But we could go on other things. There's plenty of stuff. Another thing with the paranormal is the whole missing people who just disappear, go for a walk, they go out into the wilderness, and they're gone. And they just vanish, and hundreds of people look for them, and they where do they? Not all of these people surely have been taken by predators. Some of these people that go missing are actually park rangers, so they're armed. They know the terrain. They know where they could go and where they can't go. They know how to look after themselves, and yet do these people disappear as well? So I don't know. I think our planet is a little bit more weirder than what we think it is. Maybe we're the ants. Maybe when we look down at the little ants doing their stuff, that's us on the cosmic scale. That we're the little ants. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. I would say there's a lot more unknown than the known when it comes to our planet, and it'll go down a Bigfoot rabbit hole, which I'm not. See, a lot of people love the Yeti, Bigfoot, whatever. I like it too, but I just don't dedicate enough time to it. But I genuinely think there's something like that out there. You've had so many sightings, so maybe that's something that these park rangers are encountering. These people that are going missing, when they, go out for these walks, they go out in nature, something happened to them, or maybe a time slip that they went through that they never came back from. Who knows?
I'll tell you a story, right? I've got so many stories, but I'll tell you the story. This is your neck of the woods, right? A couple are out for a walk, okay? And they are just going for a stroll. It's on one of the nature reserves. They're walking up a trail, and they're just having this nice day. They're going for a little wander. And a runner, a person having a jog, runs past them, right? A young lady. And then goes up, and they see that the trailhead goes up to the top, and then there's a little curve in the road, right? Where it goes round. And this woman, she runs up the top and she stops, and they're just wandering, and they're thinking, what's she doing? And she walks over to the side of the trail and steps in, right? And they're just thinking, well, whatever. And they're walking up. They get to where this lady was. She's not there. She's not there. The inside the trail is just thick with bushes and things. So if she'd have fallen, they'd have heard something. They'd have heard a scream, and they'd have heard a crackling of the twigs and stuff. And they did a search. No one could find her. There were hunters that were out in the wilderness. A line of them, all in a line, right, doing their hunting, and they were all in a line with their rifles. And there were other people coming in, driving the whatever they were hunting, deer or whatever it is that was there. And the one guy at the end, right, they're all calling out. And this one guy at the end, that after they've done their hunting thing, they look for him. He's gone. They don't know where he's gone. He's just vanished. They find his rifle up against a tree, just led up against the tree. They don't find him. Where did he go? Why did he do that? Why did he wander off? There's some weird stuff that goes on in these national forests, and it's not just everywhere. Over here, We've had some weird stuff, and people just seem to just disappear. And I don't know. Maybe the theory of they fall into a maybe they time slip into another reality. Maybe they don't. To them, nothing's happened. They just carry on, and then they just they're in that new reality now, and they've crossed over. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It just there's so many possibilities of what it could be, but I find it absolutely fascinating. I mean, I gotta say, one more. I go one more. So there's a guy. He's doing a camp. He goes out into the wilderness and he puts up his tent. Right, goes about 6-7 miles in. So he's in kind of quite away from his car, and he sets his tent up. This guy knows how to camp, and he knows his area. He knows his terrain. He knows what he's doing. He's camping, right? And late in the night, he's woken up and he can hear something very big walking around outside, but bipedal walking around. And he thinks, what's that? So he has a quick little peek, nothing, can't see anything. He goes back to sleep. A little bit later on, he can hear this, he's walking, but he's closer. And he's like, well, I'm not too sure about this. So he has another look and he can't see anything. He decides, right, that that's enough. He's not staying anymore. He walks the 6 miles or whatever back to his car and he stays in his car, right? And the next morning, he comes back in to get all, because he left all his gear there. He comes back in to get all his gear and it's all destroyed, all over the place, just ransacked. So what was that? Was that like I don't know, do bears do that? I don't know, at night, in the middle of the night? I don't know.
I mean, I've heard stories like that as well, but I mean, I don't know if you guys ever had anything close like this, but the closest thing I've ever had to something crazy happening out in the woods, I would just be standing out there as a kid. I'd like to go out into the woods by myself, and my grandfather had a pretty sizable property with woods on it, so I'd go out and explore and whatnot. This didn't happen there, but like if I went up to camp or something like deep in the woods, like deep cabin woods, there have been a couple times where I've been out like a mile and a half by myself away from the camp. And I mean, I guess you could say like, yeah, maybe like someone was screwing with me, probably more likely than not, but you just hear this viscerally upsetting, like yell or groan or something like in the distance, like very far away, like probably like, too far away for me to be a danger to me in that instant. But it was, you just hear that yelp or that something that doesn't sound like a deer or a bear or anything else you'd hear in the woods. It's just like a very crazy scream or yelp or something like that. And then you always wonder like, God, what was that? It's like likely an animal or somebody messing around, but still, like you're in the middle of nowhere. I don't think animals yell that loud for no reason, especially just like a one-off yell. So I don't know. I always wonder to this day, like what are those sounds happening?
Well, usually when people have those encounters, when they have an encounter in the wilderness, some people, not all, but some people, the first thing they say is it goes deadly quiet, and all of the baby animals that are around go, just stop doing their thing, and that's normally where something that is either a predator or something that they don't want to know that they're around. So you could imagine that in itself is creepy. If you're somewhere and then suddenly everything goes quiet, it's like, you're thinking, well, why is that happening? I mean, that in itself is just unsettling. So yeah, I do think that the whole Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call him, or he or she or it, I don't know what it is, but I think there is possibly, I'm not saying there definitely is, but if you some of the aspects of it, it's very paranormal. Because some people say, well, I saw this big beast and he was there and then he was gone, or he walked off into the woods, or there was two of them, or whatever. And there's some great captures out there of people that have captured stuff. And it's, some of those videos are, I don't know what it is, but when you watch them, it just makes you feel like, I don't know, it just makes you feel a bit unsettled because they look really real. And you watch them and you think, wow, maybe they are out there. Especially the one, I tell you, one of the ones that is gives me a bit of a chill, to be honest, is the one where the guy who's filming, and he films what I suppose is a mother walking, and he's obviously suddenly realizes that it's being watched, and there's another younger one to the left-hand side. So the mother runs across by a rock and picks up a little baby one and grabs it and runs off one way, and then the I suppose the teenage one runs off up the hill. That's like, if you're going to go out and say, I'm going to do a prank and I'm going to get some Bigfoot suits, I don't know, what are they? A few $1,000s each for a prosthetic Bigfoot suit. That's some pretty good special effects. But the problem is, we're talking about AI. Soon, you're going to be able to create that with AI, and you're not going to be able to say if it's not real or not. All right, there's going to be something that's going to be implemented to know if it's been generated by a computer, but it's going to make the job really difficult, I think, and it's going to make it really difficult for people that are what I would call, field investigators.
I completely agree, especially with the AI part. I mean, even now, like, people still make elaborate hoaxes with Bigfoot or Yeti costumes and stuff, like you said. It's a lot of effort to fake something like that. Spend a lot of money on that
Bigfoot
too.
we had the Bigfoot in the fridge, didn't we? The guy trying to sell apparently a frozen Bigfoot a few years ago. For like I don't know. I think we covered it. I think I covered it on an episode of Paratalk way back with one of the originals, actually, with when Gareth was doing. We Gareth sadly no longer with us, but we did an episode and we mentioned that we did a Bigfoot one, but no, I haven't covered that one since. But I really should get somebody on that's like a Bigfoot researcher and pick their brains, because I do find it fascinating. I do find that kind of that whole aspect. With the paranormal, and is it real? Is it paranormal? I mean, you get into the realms of Skinwalker as well, with the whole the Bigfoot scenario there with the portal and all that stuff. And then of course you've got the Montauk stuff, which is a bit I don't know, Camp Hero. I don't know what went on there. Nothing or something. Who knows? I don't know. And you could go back to the days of like Dulce and all that stuff, but it's all great stuff. It's all the days of Newsnet, where you go on Newsnet and you download apparently this is a top secret report of whatever, and you'd read it and think, oh my God, this is amazing. The Dulce Wars and stuff. Oh, amazing. Make a great film. But yeah, without that stuff, we wouldn't be here having a conversation now,
Oh, absolutely. And Reeves, I wanted to segue into another paranormal topic that I take a particular interest in. We already talked a little bit about ghosts, what your thoughts are on about ghosts, or what you speculate what they might be. What are your thoughts on demons?
Well, as you mentioned, how familiar are you with some of the old school investigators? How far do you go back in this? I mean, do you go back to sort of the early 2000s, late 1990s?
When it comes to demonic stories?
Well, yeah. Basically, the reason I ask is because back in the day, one of my friends that I got quite friendly with was the late great investigator Lou Gentili, and he had a radio show, the Lou Gentili Show, which was a nightly show where he would have many, many different guests, and he would talk about many, many subjects. But his thing was demonology. That's what his thing was, and he knew an awful lot about it. And he used to accompany a priest who was an exorcist to various exorcisms of people who allegedly had some form of attachment or possession. And he told me a story once. He went with the priest to a guy who apparently had something about him. So there was something going on. The guy, when he saw the guy, when he went into his apartment, the guy was completely normal, right? Absolutely normal. Just like, I'm just getting a lot of bad luck. Things aren't going my way. I'm just getting, just things aren't great, and I don't feel great, and all this. And the guy had been like dabbling a little bit. All right. So obviously Lou was there as moral support for the priest, because the priest was quite an aged guy, and this guy was quite young. So Lou at the time, he was, I'm not going to say he was the muscle, but he was there just in case things got out of hand. The priest starts reading and doing his exorcism stuff. And the guy was completely normal, but everything around him was going crazy. Furniture moved, the bed moved, the chair shook, and he even said it was quite scary, because you felt quite like, you had no control over what was going on. Things were moving, things were shaking, things were falling over, and the more that the priest was doing his thing, that it was getting worse. But the guy himself was just sat there like, cool as cucumber. So yeah, maybe there is something going on there. But once again, with the whole demon thing, I think it's got a little bit of it's got a very heavy religious connotation. And of course, religion, the paranormal, there are certain things to say that you shouldn't dabble, you shouldn't be dabbling in stuff. You shouldn't be doing your Ouija boards and you're trying to contact the dead. You shouldn't be doing any of that. You should leave all that alone. But, I think that, I think that demons now, if you go back, let's go back 500 years, 600 years, 700 years. If you think of witches and stuff like that back then, demons, that was maybe the devil. So the devil was possessing someone and sending out his minions, and that would make, you would have to be burnt at the stake or whatever because you were a witch or whatever. Okay, so that was their kind of thinking back then. Very rudimentary, but that was the way they thought. If we think of it now, I think that the modern media has taken the whole demon thing and they've kind of mixed it up a little bit, right? And they've kind of, it's a bit confusing. It's in our, social consciousness that it has to be a certain thing. But I don't think it's, I listened to a great audio book recently by an English exorcist, and he tells the story of all of the people that he visited to do exorcisms. And some people clearly had something weird going on, or they had something that was affecting them externally, all right, that was affecting their lives. But other people that he brought in to help had mental problems. They had a mental problem, or they had a problem that had not been diagnosed, and it was not a demon. It wasn't, and they weren't possessed. It was they needed some help. They needed some, they needed to see a doctor and to help them get better. People aren't always possessed. We've got the ability now to find out really, if they need help or not. But there is still an aspect to it where, how can I say it, where we still don't really know what's going on, where in some cases where people do have some form of attachment,
I completely agree. The age-old thing that people say, especially I've talked to an exorcist that works down in Georgia, and he always says you can't cast out mental illness. That is the number one thing. And I've watched a few interviews with Father Vincent Lampert. I'm not sure if you ever read Hostage to the Devil by Father Malachi Martin.
No, not read that one.
I'd highly recommend it. It's such a good book. He covers exorcism cases that he was a part of in New York City, in Manhattan. Super interesting book. I highly recommend it. And essentially, what's really interesting is that the first thing that they do now, especially with the Catholic Church, is that they will have you medically evaluated up and down to no end to make sure that there is nothing wrong with you. Because prime example of someone having something wrong with them and they didn't need an exorcism, they needed a doctor, is they made a movie on this called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, but it's about Anneliese Michel in Germany.
Yeah.
And she had mental issues. You can't cast out mental issues. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up, and I may be viewing this incorrectly, but when I say demonic, I personally don't mean it, because I'm Catholic. I don't mean it in the sense that the Judeo-Christian way that they view it, as in like it's solely a minion of Satan or Lucifer or whatever you want to call it. It's more so some sort of maybe some supernatural entity, multidimensional entity that is very malicious that we can't see. And there is no other way to define them other than that term. And that's kind of how I view it now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. But on the flip side, I think that if we have the ability to conjure a poltergeist, okay, we also have the ability to conjure our own demons and create something that maybe has a negative effect on our psyche and our lives. So it might be down to us to acknowledge what we're doing and help ourselves. It might not be because we're mentally ill or we've got a mental health problem. It might be because of the environment we've been brought up in, the way that we think. I mean, I could be like, all right, I could be super, super religious, right? To the point of being fanatical, right? To being absolutely, I don't care what you think. This is the way. This is the way, and whatever you think is just chuff, right? If I am like that, and people were like that, well, people are still like that now, but back in the day, that is what the church, the church was, they ruled the roost, basically. If you went against them, you ended up on a bonfire. So if you're kind of that dedicated, shall we say, and you believe something enough, maybe you're able to conjure something that can affect you in a negative way if you believe that you're not a good person or not good enough in some manner, that you've not achieved the right stuff, you've not achieved certain things. And it's like, for example, in the olden days, you would go into a church, and you must have got it over there, but you go into some of the churches over here that we've got, thousands of years old, some of these churches, right? And you'll look at the paintings, right? Nearer, to the, because a lot of people back then, they didn't read all right. So they would look at pictures and they would see like damnation, hell, people burning, people being tortured. And then the priest or the vicar would say, if you don't come to church, that's going to be you. That's going to be you there forever, ever and ever and ever. And it's like, yeah, well, if that's the only way that people can get their information, then they're going to believe that. And that's, to them, that's going to become their truth. So, yeah, I think that, there's a bit of 50-50 there. I mean, I do think that the environment as well plays a part. If you are living in a, how can I put it? If you're living in a negative environment or something that's not great, I do think that there is more chance that you can have some sort of episode or something can manifest in a way to give you like negativity and have bad luck. Whatever that might be, but I don't know what that might be. You see, we've got to the point where if you say demon, you immediately think the devil, and it might not be that. It might be something like we said earlier. It might be something completely different. You have to sort of open the gates a bit wider and have other aspects come in, because you just can't say, oh, it's that and that's it. And you've been bad. You've got a demon in you, and it's in your pocket or whatever, and it's gonna create bad luck because that's what it likes to do, and you're gonna think, oh shit, well, that's just it, isn't it? It's just the way it is.
I think you touched on something that's very important as well as part of this conversation. When you talk about different religions, you have the whole swath of not only time, humanity's time, you also have the cultures that have ebbed and flowed and risen and fallen across humanity and the current imprint that we have now. So I always like to go back to that point when we talk about, say, like demons or evil spirits or something. You can go to any number of modern cultures or religions that seem like they couldn't be any different from each other. I mean, I'm sure there's always some kind of underlying tangible connection, but for the most part, there are religions in this world that are inherently different from each other, like conceptually and stuff, but they have their own versions of demons. They have their own versions of evil spirits and stuff. And in my mind, I think that the only way that works, if it is factual, which it seems like, based off of some of these experiences that people claim, like religious heads or whatever, going out and trying to conduct these interventions against these evil spirits to help people. Like, even if you go down to like the medicine men in some of the older, more rural cultures and religions out there, like they are there to kind of like expunge or just take out this evil force that's in and around the village or whatever. So the only way in my mind this sort of thing works for real is if, like you said, there's some kind of human connection or human driven factor, whether it's, you can even go down and drill down as far as saying that they are completely manifested by us or, some shape or form because of what we believe in, because of the amount that it bothers us deeply in our gut, in our brain, and the amount of negative energy it gives off. Like maybe we do end up creating something that we ourselves have to fight, which would be, that'd be unfortunate. But if it is an external force, then that external evil force, like Chris said, it doesn't have to be just one religion. It has to be some wider net of entities that are like negative or whatever, and they see, oh, I can imprint myself in this religion or this cultural belief among humans. I just have to mimic and take that form to create as much havoc as possible. Because if I take on the evil form of something that doesn't fit into their narrative or their religion, then maybe they won't even see me or pay that much attention to me. So maybe I have to subscribe to pretending that, I'm trying to be the demon that is under Satan or the jinn that is under whatever evil force they have in Islam, et cetera, et cetera. So like
Shaitan.
maybe that's a fact. Yeah. Thank you. So maybe that is part of the factor as well.
I do think that there is a commonality. Things are connected, and we do have what people experience is very similar. I don't know if we're going to get an answer to what it is, what people are experiencing, but there definitely is something going on when it comes to it as a whole, demonology. There is something to it. I don't know what. I mean, religion is it plays a massive part. It's been around for so long, and there's so much to it. We live in an age now where there's so much else that you can add to it, and our lives have become so complicated with other stuff, and we become, we're always doing stuff. Person A tells you a certain thing, person B tells you something else. Where do you go? What do you believe? This is my advice. What I tell myself is just don't be a dick. Just be a good person. Just be respectful.
Yes, I love it.
Respect who you are and respect other people, and don't force your mindset on other people. Just let other people do what they want to do, but also be respectful. And if you do that, I think that everyone will get on a lot better. And I think that we have a lot of the problems in the world would be solved. Not that that would ever happen, but a lot of the problems would be solved if everybody could kind of just calm it down a little bit. And that's the thing with the paranormal. I think that the reason that people do have these experiences is if there is an evil force out there, they must be loving it right now with all the war and chaos that's going on the planet. They must be loving it.
Reeves, this has been, and I'm going to steal a word from across the pond, a bloody brilliant conversation with you. Before absolutely. We're going to have you back on because there's so much more that we can talk about.
Oh, yeah. Tend to go on tangents.
Before we close out the show, why don't you share a little bit about what you do with Paratalk and where can our listeners find you?
Well, Paratalk, it's a podcast. I do occasionally live stream as well. So you can either find me on YouTube, just put in Paratalk Podcast, and it will pop up on YouTube. I have all my podcasts go onto YouTube anyway. And of course, I do live streams on there. And I'm hoping that there's going to be some summer live streams where I'm going to have some round tables. So like yourselves, I get people on. I want to get groups together and come up with a topic and talk about it and let everyone have their say and see what ideas and we can sort of come up with and a kind of a freewheeling 2-hour chat. And also, if you want to listen to the podcast, the best way to do it is to go to the website, paratalkpodcast.com. And on the website, you can get all of the links to YouTube and to my social media and stuff. And also, when I publish a new episode, which is usually kind of every other week at the moment, I'm trying to do more, but with a job as well, it's a bit difficult. But that's the main place. So paratalkpodcast.com.
You heard them, folks. Go give them a listen. Go give them a follow. I've listened to quite a few episodes, and they're enjoyable. And also, if you want to be on the show like Reeves was on today, hopefully we didn't traumatize you. No. You can reach out to us at our email address of twroadpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to speak to more of our listeners. We'd love to hear your stories, have these type of discussions with you. So if you're open to that, please do reach out to us. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a rating on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share the show with your friends, as that would help us grow immensely. Also be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on TikTok at twrpodcast, our Instagram at twroadpodcast, and our Facebook by searching for The Wandering Road Podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of us, you can reach us at our email address, twroadpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We would love to have you on the show as a guest so you can share your stories, or you could submit email submissions of your stories that we could dedicate an episode to. Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next one.